From the original Sega mascot being from an entirely different species, to filmmakers paying homage to the early days of the franchise, these are Sonic, the Hedgehog secrets fans never knew. Did you know he was actually supposed to be a rabbit? Yeah, I'm not kidding. Back in the day, when Sega was brainstorming ideas for their next big thing, they explored a bunch of character designs. Out of the many that they came up with, one was a little critter known as Mr. Needle Mouse, which was what Sonic was originally going to be called. You see, Sega had their eyes set on a rabbit for the mascot, with oversized ears, and a talent for snatching things up to hurl them at his enemies. Sega's ambitions took an unexpected turn, though. They wanted to outdo Nintendo, showcasing the raw power of their Genesis console, and what better way to do that than with speed? That's when the gears shifted, and the studio decided to focus on one thing: lightning-fast action. The rabbit was tossed out the window, and Sega went ahead with a new mascot. And so, everyone's favorite blue hedgehog was born, fast as lightning, spinning through loops, and collecting golden rings like there's no tomorrow. Sonic the Hedgehog. Safe to say, the last-minute move paid off big time, since Sonic became one of the most iconic video game characters of all time, even getting plenty of film and TV adaptations of his own. Their feud with Nintendo might have created the Hedgehog, but did you know where Sega drew the inspiration for Sonic's witty personality from? Michael Jackson, Santa Claus, and a famous politician. That's right! When Sega set out to design their iconic mascot, they wanted the character to take over hearts with his charisma, wit, and that classic 90s attitude. So they mashed together a bunch of ideas that were as bizarre as they were brilliant. I'll start with those snazzy boots that came right from the King of Pop's closet. Specifically, his look in the music video for Bad. Then, when it came to picking a color scheme, Sega turned their eyes to the one and only Santa Claus, with the character sporting red and white. They decided to seal the deal with some blue in there too. Now, many people thought it was in response to Mario's red costume, but the story goes much deeper. According to Yuji Naka, the mastermind behind the speedy hero, Sonic's blue fur isn't just a fashion choice. It's a symbol of something greater. According to Naka himself, the color blue represents peace, trust, and, of course, just being cool. Look, Sonic isn't just about speed and saving the day. He's also a symbol of peace in a chaotic world, always saving everyone from the diabolical Eggman and all his evil schemes. The most unexpected source of inspiration out of them all, though, was none other than Bill Clinton. I'm talking about the then Arkansas governor and future president of the United States. Here's the thing. The people at Sega absolutely loved Clinton's can-do attitude and ability to be sarcastic while still getting things done. They wanted Sonic to embody that same spirit, a character who could crack a joke, take down villains, and make you believe that anything was possible, even in a pixelated world. As bizarre as this combination sounds, I've got to say the studio really hit the jackpot with this one. Also, did you know that before he was everyone's favorite speedster, Sonic was an air freshener? Confused? I'll back up a bit. Before Sonic raced into the spotlight with his own game, the character made a sneaky cameo in the Sega arcade game Radmobile. The game's a first-person focused racing adventure. But if you pay a little attention, you can spot none other than Sonic himself hanging inside the car in the form of a tiny air freshener, like a sneaky little debut before the original game ever came out. But wait, there's more to the story. Sonic's gaming debut didn't stop at the arcade. He also made a surprise appearance in The Adventures of Quick and Silva, a budget game for the Amiga console. Don't get too excited, though, because Sonic wasn't the star of the show just yet. Instead, he played the role of a generic enemy that players had to defeat. Imagine that. Sonic was the bad guy. Then again, is it really that surprising when you realize that Eggman was originally supposed to be the hero? Yeah. Remember how I talked about Sega going through tons of characters to become their new mascot before finally settling on Sonic? Well, one of their options was the notorious Dr. Eggman, whose earlier version was a parody of the great Theodore Roosevelt, but in pajamas. That's right. Imagine the former president transformed into someone who'd just woken up from a nap. It's a good thing this concept didn't make the cut, because how else would you have one of the most iconic villains of all time? Eventually, Sega turned the character into an egg-shaped figure, earning him his evil name. I mean, it's kinda ironic how this character, who was so close to being the hero, ended up becoming Sonic's eternal nemesis. As far as the design goes, Dr. Eggman is the exact opposite of Sonic's free-spirited and outdoorsy nature. The developers wanted him to represent machinery and development that threatened Sonic's love for the environment. So, not only did they create a super entertaining franchise, but the studio also managed to shed light on a very real-world issue. You've got to appreciate all these layers of storytelling and symbolism. Now, because the games have been so monumental in pop culture history, when fans learned that the franchise was going to have film adaptations, they were over the moon. But boy, was it a long wait with tons of delays, studio changes, and of course, the most controversial character design in history. But I'll start by taking you back in time to 2014, when Sony Pictures announced that Sonic the Hedgehog was on track to hit theaters in 2016. Fast forward to 2022, a whopping 4 years later, and fans finally got to witness Sonic's electric presence on the big screen. What went down behind the scenes, though, was more intense than a showdown between Sonic and Dr. Eggman. First, there was the whole studio shuffle. Sonic the Hedgehog said goodbye to Sony Pictures and joined forces with Paramount Pictures. The trouble didn't end there. When the first few images of Sonic were finally released for the world to see, fans were absolutely livid. Like, the poor Hedgehog looked nothing like the character we all know and love. Instead, he looked like he'd come straight out of a nightmare with creepy human teeth and eyes that would stare into your soul. Thankfully, the studio listened to their fans, giving the blue hedgehog a full makeover, bringing him closer to his video game appearance. Of course, that led to even more delays in the release. I can definitely say, though, that the first Sonic the Hedgehog film was totally worth the wait, and you've got to thank Jim Carrey for that. Even though he might not return back to the world of acting. After Sonic the Hedgehog 2, you can't deny the wacky comedic magic he brought to the franchise. I mean, who knew Dr. Egghead could be such a fan-favorite character? With his crazy antics and unforgettable catchphrases, Carrey really made the character his own. Even Ben Schwartz, the talented voice behind Sonic himself, couldn't resist tapping into that Carrey-esque magic. In one particular line, when Sonic exclaims, "There's a fish on my head," Schwartz drew inspiration from a memorable moment in Carrey's Dumb and Dumber, where the actor delivers the hilarious line, "Our pets' heads are falling off." Talk about a perfect dose of nostalgia, am I right? Carrey wasn't the only cast member who took his role so seriously. Idris Elba also put his own spin on Knuckles. While the video game character's voice is pretty heavy, Elba took things to another level, adding depth and nuance that will make you want to listen to him on a loop. Here's the mind-blowing part. A huge part of the actor's dialogue as Knuckles is completely improvised. That's right, the director allowed him the freedom to say whatever he wanted, and Elba ran with it. It's almost unbelievable how every line is delivered with such perfection, hitting all the right notes at the perfect time. But this just goes to show how well the actor knows his character. He effortlessly transitions from suave and sophisticated to fierce and formidable, showcasing his versatility in every single line, breathing life into Knuckles like no other, leaving longtime fans of the franchise completely satisfied with his performance. Speaking of which, did you catch that Easter egg right at the beginning of the first film? If you didn't, I've got you covered. Director Jeff Fowler talked about how this film was for all the fans who'd been loyal to the franchise from the start, which is why the filmmakers decided to leave little clues for them to find. So during the opening scene of the first film, you see Sonic blazing past the screen with a street sign that says Mega Drive. And I'm sure all you Sega loyalists have caught on by now, because this was a nod to the international name for the Sega Genesis console. So, from the filmmakers paying homage to the early days of the franchise, to the original Sega mascot being of an entirely different species, those were some Sonic the Hedgehog secrets fans never knew.